welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're exploring some really ancient wisdom, the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. Our mission really is to unpack these ideas because they genuinely promise to shift how you look at life and maybe help ease what the teachings call unreasonable suffering.
That's right. These aren't just abstract concepts. They're ideas people have discussed for literally millennia as being capable of fundamentally changing your perspective.
Yeah, and we found that even if you think you know the basics, there are some surprising nuances, some clarifications that can really deepen understanding right away. Okay, let's unpack this.
Absolutely. And what's really key about these Four Noble Truths is just how fundamental they are. They are the absolute root, the core of this major school of thought.
The very foundation.
Exactly. Our sources suggest these are the very first things the Buddha taught right after his enlightenment, his awakening. He apparently used an analogy, like having this vessel of water, this understanding, and pouring it into four distinct jars, each jar holding one core truth. So yeah, our goal isn't just to, list the names. It's to really get into the concepts behind each one so you can see how they might apply to your own life.
Right. And speaking of understanding, one of the first big hurdles, or maybe just misconceptions that our research highlighted, is this idea that Buddhism is a religion. But that's not quite right, is it? This feels pretty crucial.
It absolutely is. It's vital to get this clear from the start. Buddhism is definitively not a religion in the way most people think of religion.
Okay.
It's much better understood as, say, a philosophy or perhaps a school of thought. And what's really important here is that the Buddha himself, Siddhartha Gautama, never saw himself as a prophet or some kind of special being.
Not divine or anything like that.
No, not at all. His whole message was built on this pretty radical idea, actually, that what he achieved, the awakening he experienced, is completely accessible to you too.
To anyone.
To anyone. The only difference, as he framed it, is simply that he realized his inner reality, and, well, most others haven't yet. So there's no hierarchy, no inherent superiority baked in. The path is open. And the core goal, then, is liberation from this unreasonable suffering.
What exactly is meant by unreasonable suffering? Is it different from just, pain?
That's a great question. It's about the extra layer of distress, the mental anguish, the dissatisfaction we tend to add on top of life's unavoidable difficulties.
Yeah.
Not just physical pain, no, but our reaction to it, our resistance. He saw this in himself and everywhere around him, and that's what drove him to find the roots of it.
That distinction really does change things. It makes it feel much more attainable somehow. So what does this tell us about who Buddha actually was? Because that name itself, that holds a clarification too, doesn't it? He wasn't born with that name.
Exactly right. Buddha isn't a name, it's a title. It literally means awakened one.
Awakened one.
His given name was Siddhartha Gautama. And, the texts point out that many others, both before him and after, have also reached this awakened state. They too could be called Buddha.
So it's a state of being, not a person.
Precisely. So when you hear people talk about finding the Buddha within yourself, it really means awakening that potential for awareness, for clarity that exists inside you, realizing what Siddhartha realized.
Wow, that's a powerful reframing. And his background was quite unexpected too, wasn't he? A prince. Born into royalty. Seems an unlikely start for an awakened one.
He was indeed. Son of King Suddhodana. And his father very much wanted him to be a great king, follow the dynastic path. Definitely not a spiritual teacher.
Right, tried to prevent it.
Oh, absolutely. He deliberately shielded Siddhartha from seeing things like illness, old age, death, kept him basically confined to the palace, surrounded by pleasure and comfort.
Trying to keep reality out.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But of course, eventually Siddhartha did venture out, and encountering those unavoidable truths of life, sickness, aging, death, it hit him hard. Profoundly.
It must have been a shock.
A massive shock. And that experience was the catalyst. It led him to leave his life of luxury behind and set off on this intense 6-year journey. He explored all sorts of paths, deep meditation, but also really extreme ascetic practices.
Like fasting and things.
Extreme fasting, yeah. Pushing his body to the absolute limit, trying to find answers through self-denial.
So he went from one extreme, the palace, to the other, severe hardship. What did he find?
Well, he found that neither extreme actually worked. The indulgence of the palace didn't lead to lasting happiness, and the extreme self-punishment didn't bring liberation either. They were both dead ends, in a way.
Just different kinds of suffering, maybe?
You could say that. This realization was key. It led him to what he called the middle path, Madhyamaka. It's all about balance, moderation.
Can you give an analogy for that?
Yeah, think about tuning a guitar string or any stringed instrument. If the string's too loose, the sound is just dull, flat. If it's too tight, it sounds harsh, or it might even snap. But there's that sweet spot right in the middle where the tension is just right and the note rings clear and true. That's the middle path, that perfect tension. And he saw this as the path of Dharma, the true way, applying not just to spiritual practice, but to all aspects of how we live. Balance.
That makes perfect sense, the middle path. And speaking of clarity and getting things right, our sources really emphasize the importance of the language used in these original teachings. Apparently, it's crucial for truly getting these truths.
Oh, absolutely. This is a really critical point because translations can sometimes flatten the meaning. Buddha spoke Pali.
Pali, not Sanskrit.
Well, it's related to Sanskrit, but described as more of a common tongue, a street version, maybe. And the thing about Pali words is that they're often built from sounds, from vibrations, giving them these really rich, complex, multi-layered meanings.
More nuanced than, say, English words.
Often, yes. A single Pali word can carry several shades of meaning that one English word just can't capture. Take Saka, for example. It gets translated as truth.
The Noble Truths, Saka.
Right. But truth in English usually means, a fact, something empirically verifiable. Saka is much deeper than that. It means the way things actually are, like a universal law.
Like gravity.
Exactly like gravity. It's a fundamental law of life. It's not something you choose to believe in or not. It just is. Understanding this nuance is vital because when Buddha talks about these truths, he's not asking for belief in facts. He's revealing the underlying laws governing our existence.
So it's less about faith and more about understanding these operational principles of reality.
Precisely. You don't argue with gravity, you understand it and work with it. Same idea here. Understanding these laws allows you to navigate life more skillfully. It changes how you engage with everything.
That's a massive shift in perspective. Okay, so with that understanding of Saka as a law, let's dive into the first one, the first noble truth. Often called suffering, its name is dukkha. But based on what you just said, it's clearly more complex than just suffering, isn't it?
Exactly. And the way the teachings frame these four truths is often compared to a physician's approach.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, first comes the diagnosis, what's the issue? Second, what's causing it, the etiology. Third, is there a cure, the prognosis. And fourth, what's the treatment plan, the prescription.
Okay, I like that framework. Diagnosis, cause, prognosis, treatment.
Right. So the first noble truth, dukkha, is the diagnosis. And yes, suffering is the common translation, but it's really quite insufficient. It makes it sound like life is just constant pain or misery, which isn't the point.
So what is the point of dukkha?
It points to a more subtle but pervasive quality of life as it's usually lived. It's the inherent dissatisfaction or unease, maybe dis-ease is a good way to think of it, that background hum that things aren't quite right even when nothing is overtly wrong.
Like something's just off. Not necessarily a disaster, but just not smooth.
That's a great way to put it. I used the analogy of a cartwheel before. Imagine the axle isn't perfectly centered.
Right, you mentioned that.
The wheel still turns, the cart moves, but the ride is constantly bumpy, uneven, unsatisfying. It might not break down completely, but it's just not a smooth, effortless ride. That's dukkha.
Ah, okay. The off-center wheel. That makes it very clear.
Yeah. And Joseph Goldstein, a well-known Western Buddhist teacher, offers a really useful definition. He calls dukkha the inevitability of unwanted experiences.
The inevitability of unwanted experiences. That cuts right to it.
It does, because life is full of unwanted experiences, big and small. Even if you're generally happy or successful, you still encounter things you don't want. That inherent friction, that's dukkha.
So it's not pessimism saying life is bad. It's realism.
Exactly. It's a realistic diagnosis. And a key part of this is understanding anicca, impermanence.
Oh my God.
Impermanence, the fundamental truth that nothing lasts. Everything is constantly changing. Good times change, bad times change, we change.
And that change itself can be an unwanted experience, even if things are changing for the better sometimes.
Well, yes, because we tend to cling. We cling to the pleasant, we resist the unpleasant, and since everything is changing, that clinging inevitably leads to that feeling of dukkha when things shift. So this first truth isn't meant to be depressing, it's just stating the fundamental condition of existence as we experience it. Unwanted things happen because everything changes.
Okay, that really clarifies dukkha. It's that baseline level of unsatisfactoriness, the bumpiness tied to impermanence and unwanted experiences. So If dukkha is the diagnosis, what's the cause?
Mm.
What does the second truth, samudaya, tell us? This feels like where the unreasonable suffering really comes in.
Yes, exactly. Samudaya gets to the root cause. It identifies the origin of this dukkha, this dissatisfaction, as tanha.
Tanha. And it's translated as...
Often as thirst or craving or grasping. But again, we need a crucial distinction here.
Okay.
It's not saying that desire itself is the problem. Having desires, wanting to grow, wanting to learn, wanting connection, that's natural, that's human.
So it's not about becoming passionless or something.
Not at all. The sources are very clear. The problem isn't desire, it's attachment to the desire. It's the clinging, the craving, the absolute insistence that things must unfold in a specific way for us to feel okay.
Ah, the attachment is the issue. Not the wanting, but the needing it to be exactly that way.
Precisely. It's the difference between a preference and a rigid demand.
Can you give an example of how that plays out?
Sure. Let's use that simple dinner example again. You really want pasta tonight. That's the desire. Maybe you've been thinking about it all day.
Okay, got the pasta craving.
Right. But then your partner or friends say, hey, let's get burgers instead. Now, if your desire for pasta was just a preference, pasta sounds good, but burgers are fine too. There's no suffering, no dukkha arises from the change of plans.
You just roll with it.
Exactly. But if you were attached to having pasta, if your internal narrative was, I need pasta tonight to be happy, or it's unfair I don't get the pasta, then the shift to burgers causes frustration, irritation, maybe even anger. That's tanha, the attachment creating dukkha.
It's the rigidity.
Yeah.
The lack of flexibility.
Yes. Another one. Maybe you desire a promotion at work. Healthy ambition. But if you become attached to that specific promotion, defining your entire self-worth by getting it, then not getting it, or getting a different but equally good opportunity can feel like a crushing failure.
Even if objectively it's not.
Right. The desire for career growth isn't the problem. It's the attachment to one very specific outcome as the only acceptable result. That attachment is the hook that pulls us into suffering when reality inevitably doesn't match our rigid expectations. It's the root of that unreasonable suffering we add on top.
That distinction between desire and attachment is incredibly insightful. It's about where we create our own prisons, isn't it?
In many ways, yes. It's about recognizing how our own clinging mind contributes to that feeling of the off-center wheel.
Okay, so, wow, we've really unpacked some foundational ideas today. Starting with understanding Buddhism more as a philosophy, a path available to anyone. Then clarifying who Buddha was, the awakened one, a title, not just a name. And getting into the nuances of language, how Saka means more like a law of reality.
Right, those foundational pieces are key.
And then diving into the first two noble truths themselves. Dukkha, that diagnosis of inherent unsatisfactoriness, the bumpy ride.
The off-center wheel.
Exactly. And samudaya, identifying the cause as tanha, not desire itself, but our attachment to specific outcomes, our craving and clinging. I feel like even just understanding these first two gives you a completely new lens to look at your own daily experiences.
It really can. We've basically covered the diagnosis and the cause, the first half of the physician's model, you could say. We've laid out the problem and why it arises according to these teachings.
And there's more to come.
Absolutely. The next part of this exploration will look at the remaining two truths. They offer the prognosis, yes, there is a way out of this dissatisfaction, and the treatment plan, the path itself, which leads towards liberation, often called Nibana or Nirvana, the way to center the wheel, perhaps.
Fantastic. I'm really looking forward to getting into that. We've covered so much ground, but it feels like we're just scratching the surface. So maybe something for you, the listener, to ponder this week. Where do you notice that off-center wheel feeling in your own life?
Yeah. Is it big stuff, or is it more those small daily irritations, those subtle dissatisfactions?
I'm thinking about that second truth, samudaya. What role might your own attachments, those times you find yourself rigidly insisting things must be a certain way, be playing in that feeling? Just something to observe, perhaps.
Gentle observation, yes.
Thank you so much for joining us for this exploration today. We hope it sparks some insights, and we'll continue the journey next time.